Now, some of you who have been watching me for the last 4 years, you will know that I am not a very controversial channel. I'm not the kind of channel that will make a dozen videos about why I think the game is dying, and I'm not here to tell you today that I think the game is dying. I actually think it's going to do pretty well long term. Financially, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, they have nothing to worry about. That doesn't mean it isn't changing and turning into something completely different than what many of us started playing. Magic the Gathering had sort of a niche following, like a lot of things that would be considered part of a nerd culture. It's something that people heard about, but until recently, I would say, if you go back to the aughts, if you go back to the early part of the last decade, there were many people who still probably didn't even understand what the game was, what a trading card game is, and things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! The rush to popularity from those games only really helped to draw more attention to this game, Magic the Gathering. Suddenly, a trading card game was a genre. But this is also part of the problem here, this rush to popularity. When is the quest for profit a detriment? Is it with the direct-to-customer sales from Hasbro? Is it a specialty bundle being sold only in Walmart or Target? Or is it with the dozen different crossovers of popular franchises that have nothing to do with Magic the Gathering? It's what I like to refer to as a cheapening effect. It's when the game has lost its own identity and is sort of assimilated with this highly commercialized organism that is Hasbro, where suddenly the goal is to advertise, to market this to different demographics, with the hope that you will grow your audience, you will grow your customer base, and you will increase your revenue. I see the logic in this. I see the logic in wanting to make more money. And if it's between us, the people who want the game to go back to its roots, or the increased revenue off of things like Magic Arena, off of the different crossovers, and direct-to-customer sales, it's probably going to be all of that over myself, my opinion. And I understand that. I'm not in denial. Money usually wins out in these situations, but it deserves to be pointed out that this game had its own identity at one point. It had its own lore, and a myriad of things happened since. And I can pinpoint a certain time, I would say around 2015, when it started to go downhill. Suddenly, instead of slowly telling a story over a 3-set block, something that would really focus on the world-building aspect of each plane, we then shifted to 2-set blocks. So now you only had 2 sets to explain what was happening on Zendikar, and then you only had 2 sets to explain what was happening on Innistrad. 2 sets for Kaladesh, 2 sets for Amonkhet, 2 sets for Ixalan, until all of a sudden, we stopped having the 2-set blocks. Now we just spend 1 set per plane trying to figure out why this is important, trying to figure out what's happening that is relevant to the lore of Magic the Gathering. And while this does speed up the game, it allows you to explore different mechanics quicker. You can go to a completely different plane, go back to something like Zendikar, go back to something like Theros, and you don't have to spend 3 sets explaining them. It also takes away from the tradition, it takes away from the world-building aspect that I was talking about. If you don't have world-building there's really no point in investing any time into reading this lore, because just about every character has the potential to be a planeswalker, thanks Lorwyn, thanks Battle for Zendikar, really just exacerbating the problem there, which added more flair to the game, but sadly it took away from its lore. The idea that a Super Avengers squad, a team of planeswalkers, with the help of every other planeswalker from the multiverse, could take on this evil planeswalker. And they're all in this one set, and there are like 50 different planeswalkers you've never even heard of who are joining in on the battle. You have to ask yourself, is this worth it, long term, for the game to pretty much just evolve into, well, we've run out of ideas. We spent our one good villain, we wasted our time trying to be like something we're not, and now we're wasting our time crossing over with other franchises. It really just speaks to the lack of confidence in the Magic the Gathering lore, that it really couldn't stand on its own, that it eventually had to become this highly commercialized, easily marketable board game pretty much. I mean, it's the same thing that happens with Monopoly, but that was the same game being sold for years. Magic was always able to change, it was always able to offer something new. It's just that Wizards of the Coast were devoid of creativity when it came to offering a consistent product. Now all of this, I haven't even really touched on the financial aspect of it, and I haven't even really touched on the collector item aspect, But hear me out. The game is no longer sold as a form of escapism like it used to be. Instead, what do we see on every product now? We see a label for a collector's item. This is a specialty, one-of-a-kind item that you're never going to find ever again. Buy this now. There are at least 3 different specialty artwork, extended border, shiny, neon, x-ray, negative foil cards, or whatever they're doing now in each pack, and they all cost $20 per pack now. And if that's not enough for you, there are different tiers of booster boxes. So we have this booster box, we have the draft booster box, we have a collector's booster box, we have the ultimate collector's secret rare booster box, and ones that are just not affordable. So they've put a paywall on rarity now, which doesn't make any sense at all, because that's not how rarity usually works with this game. If a card was rare before, it's because the rate that you were able to pull it in a booster box was incredibly low. I will use the Zendikar Expeditions from the Battle for Zendikar set as an example, because in each booster box you had a chance of maybe pulling one of them if you were lucky, which meant that in order to get a specific expedition, you would either have to open several booster boxes or find someone who did, which meant that they were actually rare, they were actually harder to find. Now you have a card that is kind of like that. You have a shiny foil extended art variant of whatever card you want, but you can only get it in this very specific product that costs you like $400, but it's a lot easier to get in that product. So essentially they put a paywall on rarity, where now it doesn't really matter, it's just how much money do you have, and the uncomfortable part is over. The uncomfortable part of maybe opening up a pack to see if you get something, you never have to worry about that ever again, because the likeliness of you getting what you want, there's a $sign right there. And this just adds to the problem of just having all these different card art variants, having all these labeled collector's items. Calling something a collector's item doesn't make it a collector's item. We've seen this in other industries like the comic book industry before, and I don't know why you would want to repeat the same mistakes that they did. They also misunderstood what made a certain comic book rare. Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, they seem intent on making a similar mistake here. Right now, it doesn't seem like a big deal. The game is fine. Again, I'm not going to be the person here saying the game is dying, but long term, I am almost certain this is going to have a negative impact. There are different factors into why something is rare. It's because a card is good, a lot of people have bought it, making it harder to find, or that a card has a really low print rate. Slapping any labels on it, slapping a certain price tag on a product you're selling direct to customer, that doesn't make something rare. And then we go on to the last thing I really want to talk about, the secret layer. Probably the worst offense from Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, this idea that we'll create these mechanically unique cards. Sometimes there'll be crossovers like with The Walking Dead. This is going to be a one-of-a-kind product that you can only get through the Hasbro store, effectively cutting out the middleman, the distributor, who then sells to your local game store. They've cut out that whole distribution chain, and they're going to sell it to you, pretty much keeping all of the profits for themselves, which again makes perfect sense for business. They've saved their own bottom line. It kind of goes back to the respect for what this game was and its lore. You also have to respect that this game was built on the local game store. It was built on local business, which also helped to give it its own feel, its own niche. This isn't something you went to big business for. This wasn't something you went to Walmart to figure out. You had to go seek out your own local game store. You had to seek out a friend of a friend, figure out where everyone's playing games. And one of the things that Wizards of the Coast used to do to help out local game stores was offering them products like these that they're selling now through the Hasbro store. You don't have to like The Walking Dead secret layer, but this is something that should have been sold through the local game store. I understand 2020 was a difficult year. I understand it's still going to be difficult, but moving even more of these products to online sale only is just a disaster waiting to happen. And again, I'll never say that the game itself is dying, but the local game stores are closer to dying off. It's really one of the only things I'm actually upset about through all of this. It's that the local game store, these are the people who have to suffer to sell your game. In the first couple years of their own business, they're not even making that much money. And they weren't even helped out this much. They weren't even allowed to have certain specialty products like these to sell as exclusives. I understand they have promo cards. They're given all kinds of promo cards. That's great. But make all of these game store exclusives. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. I understand the sense in cutting out the middlemen for your own bottom line, Hasbro, but it makes you look greedy, and I think that's the trend here. That's what I'm starting to notice. This video is, again, not about the game dying, it's about the cheapening effect that all of this has on the game. So if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, like, comment, share, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future ones. Void here signing off. See you all next time.